Hi, my name is Kendra Boyer, and I'm going to be discussing the Tuskegee syphilis study. The Tuskegee syphilis study was an ongoing study from 1932 to 1973. It was the infamous clinical research study that was constructed to analyze the untreated progression of syphilis among disadvantaged and uneducated Black males. The study included recording the progress of the disease and performing an autopsy on deaths. These participants were told that they just had bad blood and were promised free care. The men were never told that they actually had a sexually transmitted disease. Participants suffered from paralysis in their limbs due to spinal tap procedures being performed to obtain fluids from their spines, neuronal damages. Some participants passed away from syphilitic lesions, and significant others were infected, and many offsprings of the participants were born with congenital syphilis. The participants were not told during the study that syphilis was treatable, when actually they discovered that penicillin could cure it, and the participants were never even offered to take penicillin. They were led to believe that they were receiving adequate care, which they weren't. In fact, they were unknowingly enduring unnecessary suffering during the study. There's an oath physicians take that is not law, but it provides moral and ethical advice to physicians. It's called the Hippocratic Oath. It's one of the oldest binding documents in history. The oath is still held sacred by physicians to treat the ill to the best of one's ability. It preserves a patient's privacy, and it teaches the secrets of medicine to the next generation. The oath dictates the obligations of the physician to the students of medicine and the duties of the pupil to the teacher. In the oath, the physician pledges to prescribe only beneficial treatments according to his abilities and judgment, to refrain from causing harm or hurt, and to live an exemplary personal and professional life. There were so many ethical issues within the study. Failure to obtain informed consent being one. Informed consent is making the patient aware of the risk involved, the benefits of the study, the participants' rights, and the purpose of the study. A violation of ethical principle of to do no harm, to do good, and to show compassion toward others occurred when the participants weren't told the truth. It just makes you wonder what happened to the Hippocratic Oath these physicians took. If the participants were given accurate information on the research that they were involved in, then they could have had the right to autonomy and informed consent. They would have had the right to decide if they wanted to participate or not. They were lied to, they were promised free meals, bus rides to and from the study, and placebos for free treatment. I'm guessing since they did not follow any other ethical or legal guidelines, then most likely they didn't follow any confidentiality or privacy guidelines. When I was researching the Tuskegee syphilis study, there was images that appeared with people's pictures online. And I'm going to take a wild guess and assume that these individuals did not sign a photo release or photo consent form to give permission to share their photos. Another ethical issue was that Alabama passed a law in 1927 that required the reporting and treatment of several venereal diseases, including syphilis, by medical personnel. The United States Public Health Service ignored the state law and didn't report these venereal diseases. And it just blows my mind that the medical community knew about this study, and many of the disease experts that were working for the United States Public Health Service were contacted for advice for the study, and sadly they weren't against it. Peter Buxton was a venereal disease investigator for USPHS, and he started questioning the mortality of the Tuskegee study. In 1972, Buxton resigned and entered law school. However, this study weighed heavily on his mind, and he contacted the Associated Press. Jean Heller was assigned to the story, and her findings of the Tuskegee study of untreated Negro male was published. So the question is, was the act of whistleblowing morally wrong on Buxton's part? Absolutely not. If he had not exploited this horrendous study, many more African Americans would have suffered and died from syphilis. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment was the most shockingly and prolonged non-therapeutic experiment ever conducted by a government agency. In 1973, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that on behalf of the participants and their families, a class action lawsuit was filed. A settlement of $10 million was reached out of court, and the government would provide lifetime medical benefits and burial services to all who was involved, including widows, wives, and offsprings. Health and medical benefits were added in 1995. The author of the Tuskegee study, Fred Gray, was the lawyer who represented the participants. Fred Gray painted a horrific picture of what these participants endured throughout the study because of his involvement with them. Gray needed to share the inhumane justices that the participants went through and pointed out how it should never happen again to anyone. He used his knowledge from the participants to prosecute in the case of Pollard versus United States of America. Gray made accusations against the United States government because they violated human rights. The U.S. government failed to medically treat the participants, knowing that they had STD that could be treated. The Public Health Service did not tell the participants that they had syphilis and that it could be treated. The Public Health Service made the participants believe that they were being properly treated for whatever sickness they had, when indeed they weren't. The Public Health Service failed to obtain written consent of the participants. The study only contained black males and no whites were selected, meaning that the participants were racially discriminated against. And lastly, there were no guidelines set for the study. The study addresses so many ethical dilemmas, racial inequalities, and respect for life. Even though a treatment for syphilis was identified in 1945, the study continued until 1972, when journalists condemned the research as explicitly racist and culturally destructive. Not only were the participants harmed by mistrust in the benefits of the physicians, but other African Americans and minorities were skeptical and are today as well. There was a lack of cultural competency acquired by the medical professionals. In 2005, there was a study conducted where there were 401 African American participants involved, and 87.1% felt that a similar study could happen again. The Tuskegee syphilis study has caused African Americans to fear participating in controlled clinical treatments. And if physicians practice cultural competency, then it would build a stronger relationship between them and their patients. Healthcare professionals should build a culturally sensitive and unbiased atmosphere to increase levels of awareness, knowledge, and skills through continued self-assessments and cultural awareness, and then they should adapt their work according to increased knowledge. In the Tuskegee today, that 20th century tragedy is still very relevant. They felt that the government really wanted to inject something in their bodies, and they were going to eventually die from that. And the lingering mistrust of the medical system makes some Black Americans more hesitant now to sign up for the COVID vaccine because they fear that the history is repeating itself. After many ethical and lawful violations were discovered from the study, the U.S. government changed how research on humans was being performed. In 1974, the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research was formed, and it ensures that basic principles of research were conducted and followed. The regulations were recommended by the Commission in 1974 that researchers obtain voluntary informed consent from all participants before conducting any clinical studies completed by the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. They also required that all studies performed on humans be reviewed by the institutional review boards and meet ethical protocols. Ethical issues of biomedical research are reviewed by an ethics advisory board that was formed in the late 1970s. This board created the Belmont Report that guides human research and defined 3 main ethical principles that need to be met for human research. Justice, respect for the person, and beneficence. In 1991, the Federal Policy for Protection of Human Subjects was adopted. In 1995, President Bill Clinton created the National Bioethics Advisory Commission that reviews current regulations, policies, and procedures of human research to protect the subjects involved in studies. And in 2001, the President's Council on Bioethics was formed. In 2009, the Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues was established. Ways to avoid similar issues would be that healthcare professionals should simply just abide by the laws and regulations. There's guidelines provided by many advisory boards and policies on human research. Healthcare providers should obtain informed consent. They need to be honest with their patients, and they need to form a rapport to gain their trust. They should respect their patients. They should not be biased, judgmental, or discriminate against anyone because of their race, age, sex, or even their socioeconomic status and education level. Healthcare professionals should make decisions in good faith and in a reasonably prudent manner. They should abide by the code of ethics and provide the best quality of care to every patient without bias and protect those committed to their care from harm and injustice. Thank you.